Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive with us. Today, we're going to be talking about relational trauma. And, I bet a lot of you have had those moments where, you react in a way and you're like, whoa, man, that didn't feel like me. Maybe you overreacted or you just shut down. Or you find yourself like, Hugo, really needing everybody to like you. Well, Juha Klaavu, he's a Jungian psychoanalyst. And he might just argue that. You know those moments that we have like that? Those are actually echoes of our early experiences. Specifically, he says, relational trauma. So get ready to unpack some seriously insightful stuff on this topic with us.
Yeah, Klaavu's work is so interesting. It really zeroes in on how these early relationships, especially in that first year of life, can impact us on such a deep level. And he's suggesting that even in the absence of abuse, like overt abuse, the way we're treated by our caregivers can leave lasting wounds.
So it's not necessarily about, a single traumatic event, but more about like the absence of something crucial.
Yeah, exactly. Think of it as a lack of consistent emotional presence and empathy from our caregivers, that sense of being truly seen and understood.
Okay, so how does he differentiate this then from the general understanding of trauma? Because isn't trauma always about something bad happening?
That's a really great question. And Klaavu challenges that assumption. He makes this distinction between shock trauma, which stems from a single overwhelming event, and relational trauma, which unfolds over time within those, crucial early relationships. It's like the difference between a sudden earthquake and the slow, steady erosion of a coastline. Both can be devastating in their own way.
I like that analogy. So, okay, the lack of emotional attunement then from caregivers is key here. But how does that actually play out in a child's development?
Well, Klaavu says it can actually hinder the development of the true self, that authentic core of who we are. And instead, individuals might develop what he calls chaotic selves. And these are almost like mini personalities that are formed to cope with those early relational dynamics.
Okay, so can you give us an example of that?
Yeah. Imagine a child who learns that expressing their needs leads to rejection. They might develop a chaotic self that's overly accommodating and people-pleasing as a way to avoid that pain.
So it's like we create these masks to protect ourselves, but then they end up running the show.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And recognizing those masks can be incredibly challenging. Klaavu points out how people affected by relational trauma might struggle to even perceive it as trauma because it becomes their normal. It's the baseline for how relationships should be.
Oh, wow.
He shares the story of a client who described her childhood as good and happy, but in therapy, uncovered. A deeply troubled dynamic with her mother. That involved emotional manipulation.
It makes you think about, how often we judge families from the outside, assuming everything's fine if things appear normal on the surface.
Absolutely. And it highlights how difficult it can be to identify relational trauma, both for the individual experiencing it and for those around them.
So if those early experiences then become our normal, how do we even begin to recognize relational trauma in ourselves?
Yeah. Well, one way is to pay attention to those moments when you react in ways that feel out of alignment with your values or your true self. Those sudden outbursts, the need to please everyone, even self-sabotaging behaviors. These could be signs of those chaotic selves taking over.
So awareness is the first step. What else should we be paying attention to?
Well, Klaavu suggests that a mismatch in temperament or sensitivity between a parent and child can also contribute to relational trauma. So imagine a highly sensitive child, raised by parents who are less attuned to those emotional nuances. The child's needs might go unmet, leading to feelings of invalidation and distress.
And to make matters worse, those sensitive kids might get labeled as difficult or overreacting, further compounding their sense of being misunderstood.
Precisely. And this is where it gets even more interesting. Klaavu observes two common patterns that often emerge from this dynamic: the problem child and the good child. It's like two sides of the same coin, both stemming from the same underlying pain, but manifesting in opposite ways.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Break down these problem child and good child patterns for us.
So the problem child acts out their distress, maybe even becoming the family scapegoat. They might rebel, get into trouble, or constantly seek attention, even if it's negative attention.
So their behavior is a way of trying to get their needs met, even if it's through conflict or disruption.
Exactly. Now, the good child, on the other hand, might overachieve and conform, desperately seeking validation and a sense of control through external accomplishments.
So they might become the perfect student, the helpful child.
Yeah.
Always trying to please.
Yeah. And in a way, aren't they both just trying to navigate an emotionally unstable environment? It's not about one being better than the other.
Right.
They're both trying to cope with the pain of relational trauma. And what's fascinating is that Klaavu connects these patterns to deeper psychological dynamics,
Yeah.
specifically what's known as self-state theory.
I've heard of that.
Yeah.
It's about how different parts of our personality interact, right?
Right. But Klaavu adds another layer by introducing the concept of the basic self. So think of the basic self as that face we present to the world. It's a blend of our true self, those inauthentic aspects we've developed to cope, and all the external influences we've absorbed.
It's like a carefully curated persona almost.
Yeah.
Shaped by, those early experiences
Yeah.
and the roles we've learned to play.
That's a great way to put it. And within this basic self, those chaotic selves can still be lurking, ready to kind of take over,
Yeah.
especially when we're triggered or under stress.
So even if we're, generally functioning well in life,
Yeah.
those problem child or good child patterns can still kind of hijack our behavior when those old wounds get poked.
Exactly. And Klaavu's work here actually builds on the ideas of Carl Jung, who was, a pioneer in psychoanalysis. Jung identified these patterns of behavior, these almost autonomous parts of the psyche, but he called them complexes.
Interesting. So Jung was already onto this idea then of these mini personalities operating within us.
Absolutely. And like Klaavu, he emphasized that these complexes,
Mhm.
or chaotic selves, as Klaavu calls them, can really take us over, sometimes for extended periods of time.
Wow. Okay. So we've talked about how these chaotic selves develop, but what do they actually look like in real life? Can you give us some examples?
Certainly. Think about someone who constantly seeks external validation. They need that constant praise and reassurance to feel good about themselves. That could be a chaotic self, rooted in a fear of rejection, stemming from, early experiences of not feeling loved or accepted unconditionally.
Or someone who
Yeah.
pushes themselves relentlessly, never feeling good enough, even when they achieve success. That drive almost feels like it's coming from somewhere else.
You're hitting something really important there. That striving for perfection, that inability to truly celebrate wins could be another chaotic self at play. Maybe it formed in response to a parent who was never satisfied, always demanding more. It's as if a part of them is still trying to earn that approval that they never received.
And thinking back to those problem child and good child patterns, I'm wondering if those are connected to these chaotic selves as well.
They absolutely can be. The problem child's acting out could be driven by a chaotic self that's desperate for attention, any kind of attention, even if it's negative. It's a way of expressing that unmet need for connection, even if it's through conflict.
And the good child, always trying to please, striving for perfection. Could that be their way of trying to manage those chaotic selves?
Yeah.
To keep them at bay?
It's a very common coping mechanism by being good, by meeting those external expectations. They're attempting to create a sense of order and control to avoid triggering those more disruptive, painful parts of themselves.
Well, now this is giving me a lot to think about. It's like we're peeling back the layers of the onion here, getting to those deeper motivations behind our actions.
That's precisely the point. And by understanding these chaotic selves, we can start to cultivate a lot more self-compassion. Instead of seeing these patterns as personal failings, we can understand them as adaptations to difficult circumstances. We were doing the best we could with the resources we had at the time.
So it's not about blaming ourselves or anyone else, but about understanding where these patterns came from. But does that mean we're destined to keep repeating them forever?
Not at all. That understanding is actually the key to starting to heal, to reclaiming our true selves, and creating healthier relationships.
Okay, that's encouraging. But how do we actually do that? How do we start healing from relational trauma and those chaotic selves that have been running the show for so long?
It's important to remember that relational trauma, by its very nature, distorts our perceptions of ourselves and our relationships. So while some self-help strategies can be helpful, working with a therapist trained in trauma-informed approaches can be invaluable.
So it's not something we can just figure out on our own. We might need some outside support to help us untangle these patterns.
Exactly. Therapy provides that safe and supportive space to explore those patterns, understand their roots, and start developing new ways of coping.
That makes a lot of sense. So therapy is a key piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
But what else can we do to support this healing process? What are some things people can try on their own?
Mindfulness practices, like meditation and yoga, can be incredibly helpful in developing self-awareness. They help us observe our thoughts and feelings without judgment, notice those chaotic selves when they arise, and start choosing different responses.
So instead of just reacting on autopilot, we're becoming more present, more attuned to what's happening internally. Does that awareness really make a difference?
It can be incredibly powerful. It allows us to create space between the trigger and the reaction, giving us the opportunity to choose a different path, one that aligns with our true selves.
That's starting to feel hopeful. It's like, even though these early experiences might have left deep wounds, we're not doomed to repeat those patterns forever. We have the power to choose a different path.
That's the beauty of healing. It's a journey, and it takes time and effort, but it's absolutely possible to reclaim our authenticity, create healthier relationships, and live a life that feels more aligned with who we truly are.
I love that. And since we're talking about relationships, I'm curious, how does understanding relational trauma impact how we interact with other people? Does it change our approach to relationships?
It can be truly transformative. When we understand relational trauma, we cultivate a deeper level of empathy. For ourselves and for those around us, we begin to recognize that everyone is carrying their own wounds, their own chaotic selves, and we can approach those interactions with more understanding and compassion.
It's like a ripple effect. Not only are we healing ourselves, but we're also creating a more compassionate world around us.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It's a shift away from judgment and blame towards a deeper understanding of the shared human experience, the struggles we all face.
I'm really struck by how this goes beyond just psychology. It feels like a different way of being in the world, a more conscious, compassionate approach to ourselves and others. As we've been talking about these chaotic selves
Yeah.
and how they operate, I can't help but think about how our society often glorifies, like these high-functioning individuals, especially in the workplace. But what if we're actually seeing, like those functional selves Klaavu talks about, people who are constantly on the go, to keep those chaotic selves at bay?
That's a really perceptive observation. Our culture does tend to reward, busyness and productivity without always questioning what's driving those behaviors. And as Klaavu suggests, like constant activity can be a way of avoiding those deeper emotional states, those parts of ourselves that feel chaotic or overwhelming.
So someone who's always working, always filling their schedule, might actually be struggling with relational trauma. It's like they're running from themselves.
It's certainly a possibility. And this highlights the importance of recognizing that, everyone copes differently. What looks like success on the outside might actually be masking a deep inner struggle. It's a reminder to be more curious, I think, about what's driving people's behavior, to look beyond those surface-level judgments and really try to see the whole person.
Makes you wonder how many people are out there,
Yeah.
seemingly successful and put together, who are actually carrying these hidden wounds.
Right. And it really underscores the need for compassion, both for ourselves and for others, as we become more aware of our own chaotic selves, those patterns and defenses we've developed. We can start to extend that same understanding to the people around us.
Yeah.
We never really know what someone else might be going through.
That's so true. I've definitely been guilty of that, making snap judgments about people without really considering what might be going on beneath the surface. This whole conversation has definitely shifted my perspective.
It's a powerful shift. And speaking of perspective shifts, this concept of chaotic selves has me thinking about those times when I feel like I'm not in control of my own actions, like something else is taking over. Those moments where I say or do something like, that just doesn't feel like me.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. Those moments can be so frustrating
Yeah,
and confusing.
they are. But Klaavu's work offers a framework for understanding those moments, not as personal failings, but as the activation of these deeply ingrained patterns. So instead of, beating ourselves up, we can use them as opportunities for growth.
So it's about becoming
Yeah.
a kind of observer of our own behavior, recognizing when those chaotic selves are showing up and making a conscious choice
Yeah,
to respond differently.
exactly. It's about developing a more curious and compassionate relationship with ourselves, recognizing that these parts of us developed for a reason, to protect us from pain.
Yeah. It's like we're finally giving those younger parts of ourselves the attention and understanding they needed all along. But, if those chaotic selves are so ingrained, can we ever truly integrate them? Can we ever fully heal from relational trauma?
That's the ultimate goal. It's not about eradicating these parts of ourselves, but about understanding them, accepting them, and learning to work with them. And over time, as we heal and reclaim our true selves, those chaotic selves can become less disruptive, less likely to take over. They might even offer, valuable insights and perspectives.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. I feel like I'm walking away with a whole new understanding of myself, my relationships, just the human experience in general.
That's wonderful to hear. And remember, this is just the beginning of the exploration. If you're intrigued by these ideas, Juha Klaavu's work is a fantastic place to continue learning.
Absolutely. And for all of you listening, we encourage you to continue exploring these concepts as well. Reflect on how relational trauma might be showing up in your own life. or the lives of those you care about. Remember, healing is possible by understanding these patterns and cultivating compassion. We can reclaim our authenticity and create a world where we all feel more seen, more understood, and more connected.
Beautifully said. It's a journey worth taking.